So my name is Brian Blacker. I'm from PolicyMap, and I am the data services lead at PolicyMap, which really just means that I work with varying subscribers of PolicyMap, pretty much anybody who's doing anything a little bit different from accessing we have a policy, what we call PolicyMap proper, which is sort of like our main PolicyMap tool, not sort of this specific mass development instance of PolicyMap. And so anybody who's kind of doing anything outside of just sort of has a subscription for a couple of users to access that main PolicyMap tool. So work with a lot of folks. We worked with MassDevelopment for a few years. So this enterprise subscription for MassDevelopment has been around actually since 2016. So we previously worked with Aiden Ogaro, who I know has moved on. But kind of one of the last things that he had asked as he was kind of transitioning out was for us to, set up some refresher type of trainings and things like that of the MassDevelopment PolicyMap site this year. So we had a session with the executive team like 2 weeks ago. And then there's this session to show this resource to some of the staff at your agency. So a little bit of that table setting. So just for anybody who's less familiar with PolicyMap, so we're a online mapping and data platform. So we combine data from both public data sources, so lots of data from like the census, HUD, health data from CDC, other public sources, as well as some proprietary data on things like vacancy, some home sale data, school performance data, and we combine it into an easy to use kind of web-based mapping and reporting tool. And so it's sort of like a GIS resource for non-GIS specialists. So some of the use cases include research, market studies, business planning and site selection, grant applications, overall impact analysis, and some data visualization. And we work with subscribers in government at different levels, as well as lots of universities use PolicyMap, nonprofits, CDFIs, and then also some users in kind of the healthcare, public health world as well. We actually started as part of a as part of a CDFI based in Philadelphia called the Reinvestment Fund, originally as like an internal tool for them to be able to understand the neighborhoods where they were making loans, doing some of their work, and then to be able to start talking about their impact using some of this secondary data. And so that's kind of a little bit of the background. For this MassDevelopment site, so that MassDevelopment has what's called an enterprise subscription to PolicyMap. It basically means that you have sort of an instance of the PolicyMap tool that's available to across the agency. And this resource allows staff to look at mass development projects that we have loaded. So we have also, I'll be showing this, but we do have a point data layer in the mass development site of project locations. We update it annually. I think we'll probably be updating it again soon, just based off of the conversation with the executive team a couple of weeks ago. But kind of allows you to see project locations alongside all the data that is available from the PolicyMap data library. So you can visualize that information on a map, generate area profiles, verify information related to demographics, income characteristics. There's also a self-service data loader where you could take a list of addresses, maybe for like an application round or something like that, and load those up, see those points, and then figure out kind of which of those fall within something like CDFI investment areas or new markets tax credit eligible areas. So those types of applications. For today, I am, like I mentioned, this is intended to be kind of a refresher. Some folks may have used this tool before, some may not have. So we'll cover like a lot of the basic functionality. And then also I'm going to highlight, some of the newer features and newer data that's been added to the platform somewhat over the last year. We have almost, I guess about a year ago, we kind of fully transitioned over to essentially like a new version of this platform of PolicyMap, and kind of on a newer mapping technology and some newer features and stuff like that. So even some who may have used the tool in the past might kind of see some things that they weren't aware of. So I'll try and leave the last 5 minutes or so, or 5-10 minutes at the end for any questions. The trainings do tend to be trying to cover a lot of content in a tight sort of time frame. So I'll do my best to do that, but I definitely will leave some time for questions. But it's not a huge group, so if anybody does have some questions as we go through, feel free to stop me and we can take those on. Does anybody have anything before I kind of launch into the demonstration? Sounds good. So first and foremost, accessing the site. So PolicyMap and this MassDevelopment site, they are web-based tools. So it can be accessed from any computer with internet access. With the MassDevelopment site, it is a unique URL. So it's massdevelopment.policymap.com, which you'll see up there at the top of the browser. And so for the MassDevelopment specific instance right now, it has IP authentication. So that means that the access to this URL is restricted to those, computers or those basically that you're within like a permitted range that MassDevelopment has provided to us. I think to some extent, remote work has complicated that. So it's a bit of an open question. But if you're in like a MassDevelopment office and accessing this tool, you should be able to get to this URL without like a login necessary. But for those types of like, if you're having access issues, particularly from a remote work environment, those would be something that we would want to know. So you can let me know or let folks at MassDevelopment know, some of the exec folks know that you're running into those issues, and we may need to change course on that. That's been a bit of a wrinkle or a thing that we've had to address somewhat with more and more teams working remotely that previously were using these types of IP authenticated sites. So for support resources, so there is up in the top right-hand corner from the tool itself, you'll see this link to our support page. If you click on that, this is going to have a lot of tutorials, guides for different features and functionality. So you can kind of click through them, looking at how to make a map, how to search for data, add data, print a map. These are also searchable guides, so you can kind of just search like custom regions is something that we'll talk about today. So you can do like just keyword searches here, see the different sort of posts that come up, select one of them. So there's different ways that you can interact with this. We do have just like a contact, so if you have just like general support questions, you're seeing issues running into, just sort of, again, like really general questions about using the tool, you can always use this contact. Just kind of goes to a couple of my colleagues who monitor sort of like a support email. And that would be kind of the quickest way to get responses on those types of things. There's also a section in here on, so there's like a quick video gallery in here. So very like a 5-minute quick start video. There's a little bit of an overview of some of the newer features. And then we also have this what's new section, which has kind of like a running list of new and updated data as it's getting added or updated within the site. And then there's also a listing of newer features. And this is something that we're just kind of adding to. So as additional features get added to this, to the platform, we kind of just highlight them here, link to blog posts or other content that would kind of help you with sort of navigating those new features. All right, so like I said, so the new version of PolicyMap is built on a Mapbox platform. It really just means like that it's a more contemporary, sleeker, kind of more fluid kind of mapping interface. So it does also accommodate the legacy version of our tool, so you can really, it doesn't have kind of like a street view, but it has, and to be able to, especially in some of the urban centers, get to see like building footprints populate the street names and those kinds of things. You can also change your angle of your view just to create different visualizations using this 3D button in the bottom right-hand corner, and it lets you like adjust your angle and create kind of more of this like bird's eye view type of map visualizations. And then if you wanted to just reset to kind of like the overhead view again, you click on that reset button to kind of come back to the overhead view. There's lots of different base map options. So this gear icon in the bottom right-hand corner will hold a couple of different base maps. So there's like a standard base map, which is what we'll be looking at for the most part. There's also like a grayscale base map. You can use, there's a satellite imagery base map, and there's also a terrain base map. So you would just click on one of these to change it over to, for example, the satellite imagery. And then you can kind of from here go ahead with like adding data layers on top or adding data points. Within each of the base maps, you also have the ability to turn on and off different sort of features or layers like within the base map itself. So like if you weren't interested in having those building footprints displayed, you could uncheck this box, remove those buildings, or remove the road labels. So let me just zoom out a little bit. So the in terms of some core functionality,
engineering job, bro.
There is.
Good, Mark. How you doing? Sorry. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Yeah, if you just want to mute, that would be great. So the one of the core features or functionality within PolicyMap is the set location bar up here above the map window. So this allows you to put in like an address, zoom to an address on the map, a city, county, zip code. So like, for example, you could search for, towns or cities throughout the state of Massachusetts. And once you select, that from the results, it will navigate to that location, show you a boundary. And then you'll also see, these, I'll come back to some of these buttons once we have some data on the map, but there's different features and things you can use as far as like using this boundary to clip your map or download the data, and we'll come back to some of that stuff. There's also some built-in political districts in this set location bar. So if you select this dropdown where it says location, you can also use state districts in here. You can go into Massachusetts and like upper lower house, and you can see the different districts. When you select one of them and hit the little search button, it will navigate you to that second district. And then you'll be able to kind of use these in a similar way. So if you wanted to, again, sort of clip a map or download data using those political districts, that's something that you can do. So then all of the data that's available in PolicyMap is going to be organized in these data menus. So I'm going to come back to the Mass Development Data tab. The data that is part of the PolicyMap data library that we maintain and update as data is updated by the various sources that are included are going to be in these demographics through the analytics menu. So they're grouped by theme rather than by source to make it simple to find what you're looking for, or as simple as possible. There's lots of data in here. So one of the first, if you haven't used this tool before, just kind of spending some time just sort of exploring the data menus is a good place to start, just to get a sense of what's all in here. But as you open the menus, or so if I click on demographics, I'll see a listing of kind of indicator families here. These then cascade out into more specific variables, indicators that you can load onto the map. So if I were looking at household and families, then I could go to family type and see single female with children. And so you see how it kind of cascades out to more specific indicators. And then if you select something, it will load that on the map. In this case, this is a data layer. So it's going to shade areas based off of this variable percent of families that are single female headed with children. And the darker areas would be where there's a higher concentration or higher percent value, and the lighter areas where it's lower. So you can remove a data layer like this just by clicking on this X up here in the layer legend. You can also always just use this reset map button just to kind of refresh and go back out to kind of the default view. So quickly just scanning through, so the demographics is going to have lots of those demographic information: race, ethnicity, age, population with disabilities, household and family types, etc. And that's a lot of data coming from the census. The incomes and spending is going to have, poverty layers, household income, median household income, household income brackets. The housing menu is going to have some point level data. So those would be sort of more like, pins on the map or points on the map showing like the locations of subsidized housing, like HUD multifamily, low-income housing tax credit locations. There's also some data in here on home sale activity, which is one of the data sets that we license from Moody's Analytics. There is data on residential and business vacancy. And then there's lots of data on like homeownership affordability, subsidized housing, number of homeowners versus renters. This lending menu has some data on some small business loan data and the actual individual loan level. So these are some interesting data sets that we have added in the last year. So like PPP loan locations with loans greater than $150,000, 504, SBA 504 and 7A loans are in here as well. From the quality of life, there's some data on like locations of brownfield, Superfund sites, some community assets like libraries, museums, and then there's data on computer and internet access, as well as food access, grocery retail locations, farmers markets, SNAP retail. Yeah. The economy menu is going to have a lot of data on jobs. We have just like unemployment data. We have residents, by occupation, jobs by industry sector. So these, data coming from BLS sources primarily. The education menu, educational attainment indicators will be in here, some school district level statistics and school performance data, locations of, universities, community colleges. The health menu may not be maybe directly as much of interest, but there's lots of COVID indicators in here. And then lots of data on like underlying health conditions and risk factors, as well as things like, health insurance information, health insurance coverage information, access to medical care. And then the federal guidelines is going to have a lot of, I think, designations that may be of interest. So things like new markets tax credit eligibility layer, just the eligible tracks, or, some of the underlying indicators that go into those designations. There's also things like CDFI investment areas, those qualifying tracks, and then again, like some of those underlying variables or indicators that go into those, as well as like opportunity zones. And then there's other designations in here too. So lots of those types of, again, typically kind of like census tract level, kind of showing areas that meet these criteria. So that's kind of the quick overview. This data search lets you search within the menus for particular data. So, if I do like a new NMTC eligibility keyword search, then I can see, some of the results here, markets tax credit projects. We do have some like project level data, eligibility status. So you can kind of scan through your results and then load data this way too, just by selecting it. And this is going to be NMTC eligibility. So it's a little bit of a different type of data layer that you're seeing, kind of more of a designation, whether it's eligible or not. So the mass development data tab is just going to hold the 1 point data set for mass development projects. So this is also where, if there's data that is uploaded through the self-service data loader, when you do that, you do have the ability to like share that data with other site license users. And so this is also potentially where you would see stuff like that. But the mass development projects point data, so I'll just select this and you can just take a look at it. So this is going to be an example of a point data set. So it will display these projects as points.
Actually, Brian, just a brief question.
Sure.
The
data loader that for the new when I go to the new PolicyMap try to use the data loader, it says coming soon. But
Yeah, so
I use it for on the legacy platform for some mapping for some portfolio uploads.
yeah, yeah. So that's a good question, because that's kind of the last feature that is still only available on the legacy version of the tool. So you have to toggle to the legacy tool. So I am going to show the data loader, and we can show that. But yeah, so
Thanks.
right now, the data loader is still just available in legacy version of PolicyMap, which you do have the ability to toggle over to upload that data.
Thank you. Is there any idea on a timeline as to when it might get?
Yes, yeah. So I think it's something that we're thinking is going to probably be in Q3 of this year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we're anxious to do that too, because that's sort of the last, again, like the last. This is the new PolicyMap kind of project has been going on for a couple of years, and it's kind of the last sort of piece of the puzzle that has to be finished up before we can kind of fully turn everything over to this new version. But yeah, so that's the timeline on that.
Great, thank you.
So when you have a point data set like the mass development projects, so it's going to be, again, just like pins or points on the map. And if you hover over them, you can see like a very quick kind of name or label for each point. You can then click on them to see more details. And so the attributes on the mass development projects are not many. It's pretty limited, but there's information on like the address and financing amounts, the date, the fiscal year. There's also these Google imagery kind of hyperlinks that were incorporated in the data as well, and you can click them, and it'll just kind of, if you click through, it'll open it up in a different tab, the street view for a particular project location, or so that you can access it in Google Maps that way. So then on point data sets, including the mass development projects, over here in the legend, you can use filtering. So if you click on that filters button, you can filter by particular product types. So if you were only interested in looking at bond financing, you could select that option, and you'll see that on the map it's only showing a limited subset of the points. If you remove that, either from here or over here in the legend by clicking on the X, it will remove any filtering options that you applied. But there's also, so there's filtering on product, there's also filtering on fiscal year, and you can, in this option, with this particular filter, you can also use a color code. So you could either look at, FY21 and FY20 that way, select a couple of years, or you could use this color code all, keep all the points on the map, and just color code based off of the fiscal year. And then you'll just see, the over in the legend, it'll kind of show you what each color represents. You can also just remove that by clicking on the X. And then there is also like filtering by municipality, if with just kind of the list of municipalities. So that's the other filtering option on that particular point data. You can also change your icon size, shape, and color from this point legend here. You can use like larger icon size or different color, different shape, just to change your visualization that you're creating. So I'm going to go ahead and add a data layer as well. So let me actually, I'm going to hide the mass development points. So up here in the legend, you can also use this little eyeball icon just to kind of temporarily hide your point data from being visible on the map. Should also mention that there is just a labeling button too that will just sort of put a label on if you're interested in displaying, just like a short label for each point in your map that you're using. So I'll add a data layer. So I'm going to use just a poverty indicator, and I'll do families in poverty. and just load this up on the map. So again, this is just another example of a data layer. So it's going to, shade areas based on essentially, estimated percent of families living in poverty. So anytime you have a data layer on the map, you will see over here in this legend a title or a very short sort of label for the layer that you're looking at. And then if you click on this eye bubble, or this eye bubble icon here, this will open up a little bit more of a description. So some of our indicators will have kind of lots more of a detailed description to them to sort of help explain what you're looking at on the map. You'll also see a link to a data directory here that you can click on, or you can access the same thing by clicking on this source hyperlink over here in the data layer legend. So it'll tell you, the source for this data that you're looking at. So it's coming from the census. If you click on this, it'll open up our data directory where you'll just be able to find lots of like documentation on the data source. So it'll tell you, what years are available in PolicyMap, what geographies, last time it was updated, and then just like descriptions about how we work with that data source. So when you have a data layer like this on the map and you're kind of hovering around, you'll see that the hover will show you, the underlying value for, in this case, it's shading the data by census tract. And so it'll show you, estimated percent of families living in poverty in that particular census tract that you're hovering over. You can also interact over here with these ranges in the legend. If you wanted to, just see, like, for example, those areas that are in the top 2 ranges here, you could select them from the legend and it will just show you, those census tracts that are in those highest 2 ranges, basically with those families in poverty greater than 10%. And then it kind of hides everything else outside of that. You can remove those by clicking on the X's and just to kind of bring everything back on. So then if you click on a particular census tract, so if we click on kind of one of these higher poverty census tracts in South Boston, when you click on an actual area on the map, this info bubble will show you just like a quick trend chart, just so you can kind of see how this variable has changed over time for the different timeframes that we have available. And then from here, you can also see a little bit more detail on like, some of the trend information by clicking on this trends button. That opens up this sidebar on the right-hand side of the screen where you can then see things like how this small census tract compares to the city, the congressional district, the county, sort of all of these sort of contextual boundaries in which it sits. And these are also all going to have, trend charts so that you can also see that how that indicator has changed over time for those benchmark areas. Similarly, you can toggle to see neighboring areas on the map. So if you were, looking at a particular census tract or, municipality and wanted to see sort of how it compares to neighboring municipalities or neighboring census tracts, you can toggle to see neighboring areas, and it will kind of show you how that same indicator, kind of what the values are for some of the adjacent geographies. So you can kind of see these neighboring census tracts, how it sort of compares. And so with either of these 2 options, either these benchmark boundaries or these neighbors, you can also kind of expand these trend charts out into a larger chart modal by clicking on this button here to see this chart with those locations. By default, it will just show you your selected area, like that individual census tract. But then here we could add, city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts, so that you can kind of create these interactive trend charts, see how these values have changed across the different census timeframes that we have available for that indicator. And then you can export this as an image that just sort of has that basic trend chart captured. So a couple of other just sort of options to be aware of when you're interacting with a data layer like this. So over in the legend, you can use these different drop downs to change what you're looking at on the map. So if you wanted to see the same variable for a different time frame, so kind of to go back to a previous time frame, you can select a different year from that drop down. You can also change the variable from the default, which is typically going to be something like a percent to like an estimated count or a percent change display. You can also change your color ramp to a different color, or within this ranges dropdown, you can change what the ranges are. So from sort of the default, you could choose to change the number of ranges to just use like 4. You can also change these cut points. So if you wanted like the top range just to be where this is greater than 20%, you can drag that over. You can make any adjustments on the other ones as well, but it just will automatically or dynamically change what you're seeing on the map too. And then there's also this, the shaded by is going to be, largely driven by how, close you're zoomed in on the map, but you can change this manually too if you wanted to see the same data at something like county subdivision, which is sort of more like a municipality. You can change that by just selecting that from the shade by. And then if you wanted to kind of lock in a particular boundary type to display your data layer, you can click this little boundary lock icon, and then it kind of won't change regardless of how close or far in you're zooming on the map. So let me bring back the mass development points so you can kind of see the point data on top of the data layer now. And so then I'm going to go back to one of the selected boundaries and show how to use those for pulling data out or clipping your map. And so like if we wanted to go back to, again, like one of the state district boundaries, like this second Hampton and Hampshire district, we'll navigate back to that area. And so once you have selected a location from that set location bar, either by typing something in and selecting it, or using one of these built-in boundaries, and you have your data on the map, then you can use this to do things like clip your map boundary to this set location, or to kind of explore the data that falls within that area. So if I use the clip, it will clip the data layer and data points and only show me those areas that fall within that selected location. Set this to census tract data. You can also, if I remove the clip, everything will come back on. You can also use this just to download data, or to use this view a table if you wanted to just kind of see like which data points or individual census tracts fall within that area. So if I clicked on this table, opens up that sidebar again, and what it would be showing you here is those 34 census tracts that fall within that second district, the individual values for percent families in poverty for all those census tracts. You can also toggle here, select this drop down and change over to see the project locations that fall within that second district boundary. So those 54 locations, you can see a listing of those. And then these are all things that you can also just download. So if you move over to this download tab on the sidebar, then you can download your layer or download your point data. So if you wanted to just sort of see like just that list of 50-ish projects that fall within that second district, you can download that list. It'll just come out as like a CSV, which you can open up in Excel, or you can download your layer data to get all the census tracts that fall within that selected location, what the variable is, what the estimated percent of families in poverty is for those tracts that fall within that area. The third option is going to be, if you wanted to download the points that fall within your selected location, but you also wanted to kind of stamp each point with the percent of families living in poverty based off of like the census tract in which that project location falls. So like a good use case of something like this third option is if you uploaded some portfolio data, or we're just kind of trying to see like which mass development projects fall within like a CDFI investment area or a new markets tax credit eligible area. Something like this points with layer data would basically just kind of stamp each project location or each point location with that that variable, so that you could then quickly get a sense of what which of those points falls within a designated location. So when you create your maps, I'll just click this map again. And if I wanted to export this, so in addition to being able to export the data, which we were just looking at, and downloading data out of the tool, you can also create a map image. And so if you click on this on the right hand side, you'll see this print icon, and this will open up a little print preview window. And you can continue to zoom in and out, center to a particular, use these different options to select whether you want a PDF output or an image output, the different layout, whether or not you want to include different legends. You can also edit like descriptions up here, make any changes, and then just save it that way. And once you set your print through this print preview, then you can click on this export button to export that out of PolicyMap. There's also a built-in, you can also save like a map view. So if you just click on this save icon, it'll just sort of save your current zoom level, the data layer that you have on the map, the data points. And so then you could come back to your saved workspace, which is just through that folder below it, and reload that same map view another session that you spend in the site. All right, so the next thing I'm going to show is, so I'm going to do the data loader, and I also want to show custom regions. So I'm going to show the custom region tool really quick, how you can use custom regions, and then we can go through just kind of a fairly quick walkthrough of the data loader functionality, or at least kind of speak to it a little bit. So the custom regions in PolicyMap, you can create a new custom region or access custom regions using this custom regions button up here in the top right hand corner. So to create a custom region, you can either draw on the map, create like your own drawn area. You can assemble a few underlying tracks or block groups or zip code areas or another built-in boundary, or you can do like a radius around a location. So I'll use this radius example, and like let's say we wanted to go to Chelsea and select this particular project location, and then look at like kind of create this custom region as like a 1.5 mile radius around that location. So I click that area on the map, set the radius over here on the right hand side, then click on continue and give this a name, and you could put in like project 1.5 mile radius. You can change the transparency on this, or the color for your particular custom region, and then you can save it. And after you save it, you can always come back to this custom regions menu, view your regions. This is the one that I just created. If I wanted to edit it, you can click on that edit icon, and you can edit things like the name. You could also edit the radius, distance, click a different point, all that good stuff. You can always delete them just clicking on that trash can icon. So once you've and then the other, custom regions are going to be, a little bit of a different process, connecting dots for drawing. Assemble, you would, click your boundary type and say like, assemble 3 or 4 counties or something like that. Click on those and build your custom region that way. So they are each a little bit different, and there are some good resources in that that help the support page on the different custom regions you can make. But once you've created a custom region, then you can use this similar to one of those built-in boundaries like that second state district. So you can, clip your map just to show those points that fall within that 1.5 mile radius. You can also see a table to see like those project locations that fall within that custom region that you created, and download that data using this as kind of your bounding geography. And then you can also generate like some of this system kind of just built-in standard reports. So if you wanted to just get like a quick community profile, just sort of like some basic demographic information for that radius area or that custom region that you made, you can generate reports from that reports button there. So then just to quickly touch base on the data uploader. So this is, so as you talked about earlier, so if you go to the data loader now in the new version of PolicyMap, it kind of directs you to go to the legacy tool. And so to get to the data loader, you do have to toggle to this PolicyMap legacy tool. So up in the top of the map, you'll see this go to PolicyMap legacy link. It takes you back to the legacy version of the tool. And so this is that last piece of functionality that has not yet been rolled over to the new platform. So to access the data loader in the legacy tool, you would just see this data loader tab up the top of the page. And for using the data loader, you can either add individual points on the map, but for the most part, people are taking a spreadsheet of addresses and uploading them. So just to give you a quick sense of the type of data and how you would upload it. The key fields that you need to have included in your data are going to be your street address, your city, state, and your zip code. As long as you have those things, you should be pretty. It should be pretty straightforward. You can have other fields in your data, so you can have like up to 50 fields in your data. You can have up to 5,000 addresses in each batch that you would try and upload. So you can do as many batches as you want, but if you had like a list of 7,000 addresses, you might just have to break it up into 2 files when you do the upload. So simple, this is a simple example of a data set with street address, city, state, and zip, a couple of other attributes. So you just would save this as a CSV, which you can do from Excel, and then click on this upload a spreadsheet, give it a name. You can make it, since this is sort of just like an open workspace, it's available to all site license users, and you can change your shape, icon, size, color, and then just go browse and find that data. So application. There's also a couple of links here for like a sample spreadsheet and tips for setting up your spreadsheet too. And then on this next part, you can identify your address details. So it'll pick up on the column names that are labeled things like city, state, zip code. This one has the street addresses in the location field. So I would just tell this geocoder that the location field is actually my street address. And then on this next step, it's going to kind of run that list of addresses and try and identify the latitude, longitude coordinates and place a point on the map. So this summary table will tell you, your results, 48 of 49 were successfully geocoded. You can sort these rows or sort by these columns. So I can sort by the geocoded and see what any non-matches will have these red dots next to it. And you can do some editing of your address information directly in here. So this has like a street name, but not a street number. So you can try and, put in a street number, see if a match is identified after you've made that edit in here. And so now it has geocoded that point. And once you've, done any troubleshooting here, then you can just click on save and close, and it'll show you a quick preview of that data here. And then you can also access this on the maps page itself under the Mass Development Data tab. So like here's the points that I just uploaded, which is just some points within Worcester. And then these should also display in the new platform, I believe. No, it does not show here. So that's something I'll look into. I thought that they would translate over too. They do, might be something slightly different about the enterprise site right now. So, yeah, so in terms of, I'll go back to the legacy tool just so we can kind of look at it. The data that I just uploaded through the data loader. So it'll show you, those locations. You can interact with this similar to, the data that any of the point data that's kind of available from PolicyMap or the Mass Development Project data. You can click on a point, see the attributes, and then you can, do similar things, download this data, with, like we talked about, like one of those, like NMTC eligibility attached to it or something along those lines, or upload the data, set a radius around, Boston and see like which points are within like a 20-mile radius of Boston, or, those types of queries are things that you can do once this data is loaded into the site. So. Does anybody have any questions? I think we can probably just sort of open it up for a quick Q&A session before we wrap up.
Ryan, can you take a data point and manipulate the size of the icon based on dollar amount, for example? So, $1 million project that's a data point, can that be programmed to be bigger than, a $10 project?
It's really just, we can set up the filtering to have like color coding. So you could have, we don't currently have that set up in the mass development data, but since it is a field in the data set, it is something that we could add. So like set up a filter based on the financing amount and have like different color assignments for the different financing amounts, but not that type of like a different sized icon based off of an attribute like the dollar amount. That's not something that you can currently do.
Thanks.
Is that available in the legacy, or is it just the new?
Which is that the filtering?
Yeah, but we'll do it, setting the color coding up by the dollar amount, say.
So it's just one of those things. It's just not set up on this data set currently, but I was saying it's something that we could, because the data is there in this mass development project data. So we could set up another filter group in addition to like product, fiscal year. We could set up another filter group to be able to filter these points based off of the financing amount, or to have like a color code option where maybe like those that are greater than 25 million or something like that are one color, and those that are smaller dollar amounts are different colors. So that's something we could set up on this particular mass development project data set.
And would it be like, how feasible would it be, like if we were to add say product type as one of the uploaded fields that gets loaded with the data loader, to maybe have the icons correspond to different project types, like loan versus guarantee versus bond financing, something like that?
So we don't have the ability to have a different icon type based off of that. It's sort of mostly just going to be this color code option that you can use. So you can have different color of the same icon type, but you can't really have like different icon types based off of a underlying attribute or something like that. And I know at least with this mass development data that the product, there was a lot of product types in the data that we've uploaded. So it's kind of more of just like a list and select, which to include. But I think there were so many categories that we didn't do a color code option because it sort of was too many.
Okay.
I think mostly we stayed in the single layer view, right? Could you spin around the multi-layer view a little bit?
Yeah, so the multi-layer map view is allows you to put on a couple of data layers. So you can have, in the single layer view, you can have like one layer on the map, like that poverty layer. You can have a few data points on the map. You can put on like a boundary overlay on top, but it's really restricted to just a single layer that you're interacting with at a time. And then the multi-layer allows you to put on a couple of data layers and then to set some criteria to see sort of like where there's intersection or overlap across those different data layers. So when you toggle to the multi-layer view, you'll see like, looks a little bit different just to kind of designate that you're in the multi-layer view. And so the way that this would work is you would put on like your first layer, change some criteria, and then add your next layer. And then you can kind of see like where there's overlap or intersection across them. So like an example would be like if you wanted to look at low income areas where there is like a presence of brownfields or that are also opportunity zones or something like that. So I'll go through a quick example real quick. So I would go to first layer incomes, I'll do low income. So I'll do incomes and spending, and I'm going to use our low moderate income data layer. So it's, typically low or moderate income is where the local family income is less than 80% of the area median income. So I'm going to set 80 as over here on the legend, set 80 as kind of like the top end. And what you'll see when you change that criteria is, the areas that are still filled in are just going to be those where that are low or moderate income, but basically where the local median family income is less than 80% of the area. So you can click on an individual census tract to see the median family income percent value for that. So then you could add another layer like from, let's see, I'm going to do a search for just brownfields because we have a data layer for brownfield presence. And so this will add that next layer on the map. And you do have to change your criteria for what to display on this second layer too. So if you wanted to just see those that do have brownfields, then you could just over here in the legend for that layer, just select just the brownfields option. Don't keep those tracks that have no brownfields or that are insufficient data. And so I'll hide this just to kind of show how the map changed a little bit. So this was when it was just like low moderate income areas. If I turn this eyeball icon back on, then it'll add this second layer back on so that you can kind of see like how now it's drilling down to those census tracts that meet both of those criteria. So there are brownfields. It's also a low income area. And then you could add additional layers on top of this too. So add like opportunity zones or add something like population that's non-white if you wanted to kind of like look at it from more of like an equity perspective to see those where it's predominantly minority populations or something along those lines.
Is this more like using like multiple filters as opposed to you're not seeing both layers You're just filtering by both layers. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, because this is really looking at it as more of like a drill down, where you're applying filters on multiple layers to see sort of those that meet multiple criteria that you set. There is a way so that now in the multi-layer maps, there's also the you can toggle from an and view to more of an or query, where it'll keep the both layers on the map, but it'll use this different symbology to be able to see areas where there is intersection as well as areas where there's not intersection. So it's kind of less of a filter and more of a like seeing them overlap, but not sort of with not like keeping all of the underlying values displayed, but just to be able to see like sort of overlap and areas where there's not overlap. So this could show you, low income. There's also low income areas that don't have brownfields, but there's lots of low income areas that do have brownfields. So that kind of thing. So anybody have any other questions before we just close it out?
This was really helpful. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hope everybody has a good weekend, and I will share this recording with Trish so that she can circulate it to the group for anybody that wasn't able to join. But thanks everybody for the time this afternoon. Yeah, appreciate it and hope it was helpful.